Welcome to the DisOrient Asian American Film Festival of Oregon. DisOrient celebrates Asian American and Pacific Islander stories and storytellers. For those of you who are coming to us for the very first time, you get to have a really special experience. We're bringing the conversations to you. I'm joined today by a really beautiful group of individuals, and they are the filmmakers of the short documentary Kaye, Next Life Around, directed by Dave Yim, and also the filmmakers of the feature narrative See You Then, directed by award-winning director Mari Walker. Hello. Both films bring us on a really unique and deeply emotional journey that speak to paying attention to your voice and also your passion and finding self-acceptance. So I'm pleased right now to introduce you to everybody. Dave Yim, Charlene Kaye, Mari Walker, Kristen Uno, Pooya Mohseni, Lynn Chen, Charlene Kaye. Welcome.
Thank you for having us.
Yes. I wanted to ask you all, maybe starting with Dave and Charlene, what compelled you to make this film?
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having us. It's a really honor, and I'm excited to be with these other talented filmmakers and actors. But yeah, I was working at a company called Great Big Story, which no longer exists, which was a part of CNN, and I was my day job was to make these short documentary style videos for like YouTube and a social audience. And so it was really great to be able to sort of stretch my creative muscles in my day job. But there was always this desire to like, what is my voice? Like, if I didn't have to do this for a media company, what would I want to make?
Mm-hmm.
So I sort of was like, okay, let me go out there and just try to make something using what I've learned from my day job over the years. And I knew I've known Charlene for going on 10 years now. We used to play gigs in New York, and we shared a practice space in Chinatown back in the day. And I knew that she was moving on from her band San Fermin, and she was gonna put out her first solo album after leaving the band. And so I just hit her up and was like, hey, can I make a film about you?
Oh.
And it was just kind of, I made like a little deck of like, here's kind of what I'm thinking it's gonna look like. And then I sort of threw it over to her, and thankfully she said yes. And I think a lot of that is just, we've had a great friendship over the years, and thankfully she trusted me to tell her story. And it's sort of, we filmed a bunch of stuff over the course of a year that didn't even end up in the film.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of just narrowing it down what we wanted the message to ultimately be. Yeah, and that was the film. Charlene, I don't know if you want to add to that.
Yeah, so I wouldn't, first of all, thank you so much for having us, Pamela. And
Absolutely.
so nice to be in this virtual room with all of you guys and to support each other's work. Yeah, so as Dave said, I was in a band called San Fermin for 5 years, since 2014. I was a solo artist before that, but I had a very strong urge to get back to my solo work post this band and just embrace my own creativity instead of serving somebody else's voice. And no one else could have done this but Dave. And there's something about, as he said, our friendship that's almost 11 years long at this point. Dave was Dave still is a musician, but we met at the American Folk Art Museum back in 2009 or 2010, doing a very casual like coffee shop style show there. And we just became good friends with him and his now wife, Deb. But I was familiar with Dave's work at Great Big Story before this, and just was familiar with his curiosity and his need to understand the human condition and to document that and, ask questions about what it means to be Asian American. And it seemed like our paths were intersecting at this point where it would make sense for us to do a creative project together. But I wouldn't have been comfortable with anybody else following me around, like being in the green room, being in these very like intimate spaces like the studio and like places where I usually just want complete focus. But there was something about how safe I felt with him as a storyteller and as a friend, and knowing that it was something that he was genuinely curious about was very touching to me. And I think he did it so much justice, and seeing the final product of what the last 2 years of work has been was highly emotional, and I'm really proud of what we did.
Oh, great. We're excited to hear more. Mari, why did you
Yeah.
feel compelled to make this film?
Oh, I mean, so many reasons. I was finishing my first short film and sending it out to festivals and starting our festival run. And I'd written several scripts that I was really excited about, but they were also budgetarily like way out of line for a first time filmmaker. And there was just no way I could get that done. So I was really struggling to find a story that I really wanted to tell. And I think at the time, there were a lot of questions sort of swirling in my head about what being a woman was and what being a trans woman was and what I had defined for myself as success in my own life and what I wanted out of my own life and how those things had sort of changed and evolved over transitioning and furthering my film career. And all those things were kind of rolling around in my head when I started writing See You Then. And then I sort of like wrote out this absolutely terrible draft. And then I gave it to Kristen to review. And I was like, Kristen, could you just take a look at this, see what you think? And she gave me some amazing notes. And I was like, well, you know, like those are really great notes. I really think that you should implement them. And she was like, what? And I was like, yeah, we're co-writing. We'll co-write the movie together. It'll be super great. And so I sort of forced Kristen into working on the film. But I'm so glad I did because she brought so much to the characters, so much to the dialogue and to the story. And we just started building it from there. And then the characters started sort of taking on their own persona. You know, that's one of the beautiful things about writing narrative, right? Is like you start writing something and it's you and it's a part of you and every single line is something that you thought of, but eventually the characters start speaking for themselves.
Mhm.
You know?
Well, that's a great introduction. And Kristen, what's your version of why did you feel compelled to make this?
Mari and I have known each other for a very long time, and she's like a sister to me. I love her, and I've always wanted to really be supportive of her. We've shared our writing across the years, and collaborated briefly on things before. But I was really excited to write this with Mari, and I was really passionate about the story. I love that it focused on these two women dealing with a point in their lives where they're kind of looking back and reflecting on the choices that they've made. And I really liked the sort of complicated discussions that they were having about identity and womanhood and motherhood. And what that means in today's world and how we define it for ourselves and how others try and define it for us. So I thought it was a really interesting piece to explore, especially with the perspective that Mari brought to it as a director.
Yes. Great. Thank you. And Pooya, how did you come to this film and did you feel compelled to work on this?
How did I come to be part of this project? I got an email out of nowhere about 2 years ago from a casting office in LA saying, hi, I'm so-and-so. I'm emailing you on behalf of so-and-so. And there was kind of like a pitch deck attached and a personal letter from Mari. And I also saw who were the other two people that were being considered for the role I ended up playing. So I was like, the first thing I did was send it to my agents. I'm like, I don't know what this is. I don't know if it's even real. You can get back to them and see what I loved about it as a trans person, as a trans educator and advocate. There are a lot of trans stories out there that are not authentic because they don't have the right people writing or consulting or working on it in any capacity. So it becomes a trans story, but through somebody else's lens.
Mm-hmm.
And it usually becomes objectifying, fetishizing, or tokenizing. Mm-hmm. And I've done my share of that. Mm-hmm. But there was something very authentic that these characters were not being seen through somebody else's point of view, but it was their story. These two women, their relationship, their regrets, their love, their hopes, and all of that. And that's kind of where the journey started. I read the first draft, then a few months later, Mari and I did our first like face-to-face Skype. I think it was Skype,
Yep.
it was pre-Zoom. And we did that, and we were going to work on it in 2019, but then the schedule got moved. And by the time we got to actually auditioning for the role that Lynn played, Mari said, we're thinking of bringing you out here to do chemistry reads. And that was when I knew that it was really going to happen. And when I got there, I met Mari, I met Kristen, I got to meet the different actresses that brought the different quality, but Lynn was the first person I auditioned with. And I still remember it, that after that audition, I was like, I think she's the person. But then I'm like, well, but we can't say that if we haven't seen the other people, but I still think she's the person. And well, she ended up being, and watching it, because I was terrified. I'm always terrified of watching myself on film, but watching it, I was just enamored by the relationship, by the authenticity about these two women and their friendship, their love, the losses and all of that. And also acting opposite, Lynn was like, I was doing it. I'm like, oh, who cares what I have to say? I just want to watch Lynn. I think it is very significant in, as you were saying, that people can see themselves in a way that is not fetishized or sexualized or undermined in any way. And I think our world needs that and is ready for that. And I'm proud to be part of it.
Well, great. It felt like the character was written for you. So you did an amazing job. Lynn Chen, tell us why you have lots of options to work on many different projects, and what about this project pulled you in?
I wanted this project so badly.
Really?
I had, when it came across my laptop the same way most opportunities do, through a casting call from my agent and my manager. And I was in the midst of post-production on my directorial debut, I Will Make You Mine. And the first thing I saw was that the audition was going to take place at Vanishing Angle. And I was like, that sounds familiar. And then I realized, wait a second, I filmed my movie at Vanishing Angle. That was one of the places that was one of the places we shot at. And so I thought, that's a good sign. So, and I really loved Matt when I met Matt briefly. He's one of the producers. And I was like, all right, well, let's take a look at these sides. And I read the sides and was like, ooh, I can get into this. And then I read the script and I was like, oh, I can really get into this. This is sort of like, the dream for an actor, a nice two-hander, juicy dialogue, very natural. I watched Mari's short and knew right away that she had a point of view and a vision that I could get behind. And when I went for my audition, I just went for it like the way I do any audition, which is you go for it and then you leave it. But there was something afterwards that I felt like, oh, I really want this one. And that doesn't happen very often. I'm pretty good at letting things go, but this one, I really felt like I wanted to be the person to help tell this story, but I also knew that wasn't up to me. So I reached a point, like I was waiting and waiting. And finally, I found out that I was going to get a call back, but it was during the same time that I was filming another movie. And I was really worried that it was going to be scheduled at a time when I was going to be filming or when I just wasn't going to be my best. And I knew there was a lot of lines because there's just a lot of dialogue. And I was like, I'm already shooting something. I don't know if I'm going to have time to memorize lines for that. And so I was just like, I need to let them know how much this means to me. And so I wrote Mari a very heartfelt letter, knowing that that never really turns into anything. You always hear about actors saying like, and then I wrote a heartfelt letter and everything turns out. That never happens with me. I've written maybe one or two heartfelt letters and crickets. And then I was like, I guess I wasn't the right person for that. But I sincerely felt like, you know, when I sent this letter, that it wasn't to be like, so you better call me back. It was more just like, I need you to know that what you have written has really spoken to me on a very cellular level. And that if you would trust me enough, I promise that I will work my ass off for you. And what ended up happening was, I believe that the callbacks were while I was in Paris on vacation. That's when I found out, and I was like, sorry, honey, I know we're here supposed to be really romantic and stuff, but you're gonna have to just go and eat your croissants by yourself. I'm just gonna be here memorizing lines. And the fact that I was so into that, I was just like, this is as delicious as Paris. like, to me, was a sign that this was a story I wanted to be a part of. I'm not going to take up much more time.
That's
but like, all I have to
awesome.
say is that when I found out I got this part, like, it was what, I don't have many moments where I like jump up and down and I'm like, oh, but I had that moment and it was delicious.
Oh, that was great. And we'll talk more about your character, Naomi, later. So thank you for sharing that. I'd like to take this moment to maybe start with Kaye and talk about the making of the short documentary. So Dave, what was the hardest part about making a film about someone you know? Almost too well, maybe.
Right, interesting. Yeah, I mean, I would say it was, I don't know if I told Charlene this, but, you know, like I said, I was, you know, I was shooting pretty consistently. I was traveling a lot for CNN, and like, I was in the field all the time, meeting amazing people. We were doing a lot of like human interest stories, and you know, you get into the routine of it. But starting to film with Charlene, even though she's someone that I've known for years and that we're friends, like there was a nervousness to it, because I was like, I don't actually know where I'm headed with this, which is kind of the exciting part of documentary. Is, you know, you have a good subject, you ultimately know kind of where you want to go, but everything that leads to that, you just got to start filming and sort of, you know, let it sort of happen. And so that was an intimidating process for me, because normally when I do stuff for work, I have to script it out. I have to tell my boss that, like, this is exactly what I want to film. These are the scenes, these are the days, and have it all planned out. Whereas this, I wanted to sort of let it be what it was going to be. And like I said, a lot of that was like filming for a few days. We filmed like a behind the scenes of her music video shoot that didn't quite play into the narrative. So you know, it was some fun behind the scenes stuff, but we didn't end up making sense in the film. I would say the hardest part, though, to answer your question of making a film about someone you know, I don't know. I don't think it is hard. I think it's actually easier, because we have this rapport already. Because part of being I think a documentary filmmaker is having that person's trust. And like Charlene was saying, like, we already had this rapport, and we could just dive into an interview, and I can just ask her really personal questions, because I kind of already know the answers to them.
That's true. You don't have to earn the trust, so you start from a good place.
Yeah,
Charlene,
yeah, exactly.
Your voice is beautiful. I mean, I think you write such deeply emotional lyrics, but your music is also very beautiful. And I think the combination is just astounding. This was really personal, and you were very vulnerable in this short film. Why did it, since you're so talented, why was it so difficult for you to go through this process?
Thank you, first of all. I appreciate you listening to the music. It was a time of the most change all at once in my life. And people talk about having a Saturn return around the ages of like 30 or 31, and it's meant to be the time in which you really become an adult. And those lessons that you've been putting off learning force themselves, they force their presence. So you cannot ignore them any longer. And I think there was a lot about serving other people that I had been complacent about for many years. And that involved my career, that involved the relationship I was in, some friendships that I was in. And ultimately there was just this giant reckoning where it just felt like, well, you've put this stuff off for long enough. We're going to change it for you and make you deal with it. And so I left my long-term relationship. I left the band that I had been in for a long time that I was so close to and was so great for having all these new experiences, seeing the world and all this stuff. But I just knew that it wasn't ultimately serving me anymore. And so it was a time of immense pain. And unfortunately, pain and change kind of go hand in hand. And so I felt very vulnerable and really scared. And so as Dave was nervous, I was also nervous to have this phase of my life so exposed. And I'd never had anything like this before. I've certainly made music videos and I've written about it a lot, but something about having a documentarian follow you around and like see your day-to-day anxiety and like talk about it in a way that you know is going to be captured forever was a nerve-wracking experience of a different level. And it just goes to show Dave's skill and his taste that it ended up being a beautiful story in hindsight. I'm so glad that this phase of my life was captured in such a thoughtful way. But yeah, like I think there was something about it being this immense period of change where it wasn't boring. So there's a lot to talk about. And, the fact that Dave and I are such good friends allowed for those really unavoidable questions to happen. And I did feel comfortable talking to him as if I were talking to a friend, because I was.
Yeah. Well, did you feel that isolation was necessary for you?
Yeah, I truly did. And often that's the only time where you have to, I mean, it's funny because right now we're all isolated, whether or not we wanted to be, but I came from a time where I knew that was what I needed for myself in order to look inward and find out, well, who am I without these people, this career, these things, like what, if you strip everything away, like who is my true family? Like what do I want? And how am I supposed to find that out when I'm touring constantly and I'm like giving all my energy to somebody who I know isn't meant for me and all this stuff. And it was really painful. But I think when you're forced to look at all these things and when all these things are stripped away, then you really see yourself as you are. And that's what my album Conscious Control was about, just trusting your intuition, even if it makes no sense to you rationally at the time.
Well, the art that you produced coming out of it is just beautiful. And I hope some of the audience gets to check it out.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
You know, one more thing I wanted to ask was, did you have any concerns that this would affect your friendship working together?
Yeah, I think so. I think sort of going back to your original question about like the hard part about making a film about someone you know is like sometimes, you know, films don't always go the way that people in front of the camera maybe want them to go. So I think that was certainly a risk. And, you know, I mean, we certainly talked about some things that I think Charlene was like, maybe we shouldn't include that. And, you know, I wanted to have that balance of like being respectful, because she was, you know, investing in this project too. And I didn't want to be like, well, we're going to put it in anyway, and we're going to ruin your relationships with everybody else. Like, of course, I wouldn't want that to be, you know, a situation either. But I think you sort of find this happy medium where there's this tension, there is that story. And I think that sort of helps, you know, the subject, or this case, Charlene, like also deal with that and sharing that story too, that maybe was hard for her at the time, but once she's able to make sense of it, like she's ready to share it. And once she's ready to share it, that can be a healing process for her as well.
Well, thank you so much for making this film. I think so many people will relate to it. And the graphics, is that you, Charlene?
That is
the
me.
Graphics I love. They just caught my eye. So you're just like creative all over the place. So it was wonderful to see that. Thank you so much. So that theme of isolation carries through to our next film, See You Then. It was very much a part of Chris's journey. Chris is the lead character, played by Pooya Mohseni. And Mari, I wanted to ask you, how did you create these two characters and to create a film that really relies heavily on not only talented acting, but also brilliant writing, and to focus it all on that instead of, car crashes and destruction, distractions and, sets and everything. It really focused on the issues.
I think that was something I really yearned to do. I've done a lot of documentary work and a lot of editing over the years, and that's been really wonderful. But I felt like if I did something that was maybe more visually oriented or I don't know, flashy in some ways, like a cool horror movie or something like that, I wouldn't get that experience of getting to really know how to work with actors. And that to me is just something that it's like basic fundamentals 101. And since I hadn't done much theater in high school or in college, I just felt like I really wanted to sort of sink my teeth into something that just relied on two leads, just sitting down and like talking it out and just having these emotional experiences. And it just felt like beyond like budgetarily feasible, it just felt like a really cool challenge. I just really wanted to challenge myself with this film, and also, like, I don't know, give the opportunity to like hopefully write two really cool characters that two amazing actors can play, and I got two of the greatest performers. And like, I mean, I just have to say, because Lynn and Pooya are on this and we haven't talked since you guys both watched the movie, but like, you both elevated the material in so many incredible ways, and I'm just so immensely grateful that I have both of you and in this film, and it just means so much to me. But really, like, that's the other thing about it too. It's not only like being able to like set the foundation and get the stuff right, but also like assembling the team around you, and a team of people that you know and trust, and people, I've known Kristen since 5th grade, and my parents were there on set, and my cousin was there, and she was next to her in the movie, and making your first film with any luck could be just a really magical, beautiful experience filled with a lot of love, and mine really was.
Well, having all that family around, that's like a great Asian American experience right there. It was a cool
Oh,
set.
totally.
And you did mention that one of the critical factors in the success of this was that Kristen is really brilliant at writing dialogue. So Kristen, tell us about how you helped to craft these characters.
Yeah, my background is in writing prose, not writing scripts. So this was actually the first script that I had ever written. But one of the things that I really loved when I wrote prose was writing dialogue. I think that some of my favorite things that I've ever read are pieces that have really great dialogue, because you don't want to give too much subtext. You don't want to have to write out what people are thinking. I think it takes away from a lot of the interest of a piece. So you have to find a way to convey their emotions and their hidden agendas and their unspoken thoughts in the words that they're saying and the way that they say them and when they say them. And that translates really well to film. I love great dialogue. I think that humans are so fascinating. The way that we communicate with each other or are unable to communicate with each other. The things that we want to say, but that we leave unsaid. So I think that dialogue can be really rich and exciting, just as exciting as car crashes and huge set pieces and all of that, if it's done right. Because you're very emotionally invested in these characters and their goals. So it was really fun to work with Mari on it. We would actually, one of the things that we would do often is we would put the script up on the television and we would read the lines back and forth. I find that's a really great way to see if it's working and if it's reading naturally. And we did a lot of honing and chiseling away at the script just from reading it out loud. and seeing if it flowed right and made sense in that sort of natural rhythm and pitter patter of conversation.
I was like the ultimate litmus test for this, because if it came out of my mouth and it sounded okay, then I was like, I think it's okay dialogue. You know, what you're seeing here is like this beautiful thing where I'm like word vomiting, and then Kristen's like beautifully articulating it and sending it home. So I
You
appreciate
got really into it, Mari. You got really into it.
I did. No, I did. You're right. By the end of it, I really got into it. I did actually get really passionate a couple of times, and I almost did. I think I did yell at you a few times, and I'm sorry about that.
It's okay. I forgive you.
Yeah. Out of love. And to Pooya and Lynn, you had some really challenging scenes to, I don't know how you did it. There was this one dialogue scene. It was a 9 or 10 minutes of, you had to carry that emotion, keep that going, and keep the mood and build the intensity. Lynn, you know what scene I'm talking about. Super long scene. Tell me about that, and how did you prepare for that?
I mean, I feel like every scene was a lot of dialogue. I mean, it was just, we were just talking. But to both Kristen and Mari's credit, you know, even though we're speaking the entire time, nothing there felt unnecessary.
Mm-hmm.
Everything was there to serve the story. And at the same time, it was very realistic in terms of, you know, showing what it would be like for two people who hadn't seen each other in so long to get together, and what that would be like. And in that, you know, you have a lot of bouncing back and forth. But in that particular scene, I mean, we shot that in two nights. We did mostly night shoots. So we were all zombies already.
Mm-hmm.
It was cold.
So I couldn't tell.
There was a lot of chat. Oh, you can't tell that we have like 9 layers of Uniqlo under armor under everything. I will never see that outfit without thinking, oh, there's a sweater under there. But I remember, for the most part, everything flowed so naturally and so easily. But for those specific emotional scenes, like I couldn't be around cast and crew like those two. I was just like, I'm gonna eat over in this corner. And like Pooya, don't look at me. Like I was, and I had like headphones on, and I was listening to songs that, you know, got me into that emotional state, because it really, I knew it was going to be a challenge, and it was. And I needed to set myself up for success in that way, because I just knew it was going to be a pouring out of emotions, and that it was going to be physically challenging as well, and technically challenging. But I'm really proud of the work that we did in those 2 days.
It was beautiful. Yes. And Pooya, your character, Chris, broke Naomi's heart. You had all of this internal struggle going on. What did it mean to you to play this character, and what was going through Chris's mind when she had to take off and find herself?
I think that's when Mari and Kristen were talking about, you know, it's like two women's journeys. And this idea of like, we're all trying to find our own place in the world, and our interaction with other people, you know, it's like, though it feels like it's intentional, sometimes it's like it just, in the large scope of a life, it feels almost like accidental, because there feels like there's this stronger river going that it overrides everything else that you have planned. So for Chris, being that she wants to have this normal life, but then there's this other thing that she's keeping from Naomi, from herself up to a certain point. And I think, you know, I had to grapple with the fact that there's this person you love, there's this person that you know you did not do the right things at the time that you kind of like, went to find yourself. And now you come back. And I felt like it was, trying to make things right
Mm-hmm.
as best as we can.
Mm-hmm.
And then it becomes like a Pandora's box of,
Mm-hmm.
then it becomes, well, who is really guilty? And you realize, they were each trying to do the best that they could at the time with what they had, with who they were at that time,
Mm-hmm.
which is one of the greatest things I took from this movie. And I usually tell people, if I want to say what the movie is about, is sometimes you have a plan of where you want to be.
Mm-hmm.
But if you open yourself to your life where you are, that is exactly where you are intended to be. Because if it wasn't, you wouldn't be there. And, we get scars through life, which by the end of the movie, you kind of realize, yeah, things didn't work out the way they had hoped,
Mm-hmm.
they had thought at that time. And this reunion is, well, it has problems. But by the end of it, I think they both kind of see their lives as it is at that moment. And maybe it's not bad.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe each of them has what they need, what they've worked for, and what was intended for them. And sometimes you need to take that as if out of your mind so you can clearly see the actuality than the supposed version.
Mm-hmm.
So it was hard. It was hard. That scene that you were talking about, the long, very emotional, very colorful scene. We were actually shooting that on my birthday.
Oh.
And I remember Marie keeps saying, like, I'm so sorry. I'm like, no, because I will never forget. I will never forget shooting that scene. I will never forget being with all of those amazing people. I will never forget actually throwing my back out at the end of shooting that scene. Because it was, I remember after we were done, Lynn, the next day, she's like, I looked at her, I said, how do you feel? She's like, I feel like I was hit by a bus.
Wow.
But as an artist, I
Mm-hmm.
feel that just meant that we were all in such an environment that we could be completely bare,
Mm-hmm.
completely vulnerable,
Mm-hmm.
and really go through these very difficult moments in these people's lives and say these very horrible, hard things to each other over and over and over again, so that then the audience, when I was watching it, I was like, oh my God, they're gonna say it. And as it's watching, it's like I'm holding my breath. I'm like, no, don't say it. But
Yeah.
and like Glenn was saying, it was a difficult schedule. And I
Mm-hmm.
believe that that's what most people don't realize when they
Mm-hmm.
watch a movie,
Mm-hmm.
what has gone into putting that 75-minute together.
Yes.
But I loved every minute of it. Okay, I loved
Yeah.
most every minute of it.
Well, we're getting a glimpse of what it takes to make the movie, and I want to thank you because you created a film about women for women. It really spoke. On the one hand, we had a woman who transitioned, and we got to revisit how hard it is to be a woman. And then we also have this woman, this, wonderful character who is balancing work and family and art and trying to find herself. And that was great. What was one of the hardest parts about being Naomi for you, Lynn? Could you relate to the character at all?
Oh yeah, no, I definitely could relate, even though I'm not, a mom.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely could relate to that dream of that version of yourself that you have, and how I think like Naomi, I consider myself a very strong feminist, and then yet simultaneously I act in ways that are not so kind to myself as a woman. And I could completely relate to that. but you know, I just want to go back for a second and talk about those 2 nights of filming. When I said I got hit by a Mack truck, it was like in the best way possible. That's like what you dream of as an actor. That was what I was hoping for when I like was auditioning for this, because the opportunity to be that vulnerable does not really exist on most sets, because you always feel that pressure of like, time is money, this is money, get the shot, we got to move on. And this was a gift, because what it was like, here's the swimming pool, we get the pool for 2 days, just like go for it. Because like, and then you'll have a day to rest. So like, it was really this privilege of being able to really go there in a very raw way, as Pooya said. And that's because of the environment that Mari and Kristen and Mia and everyone else who was involved set up for us, and was really just like respectful of our processes and what we were going through, you know, as actors, but also in character. And God, that was so much fun. And I knew as we were doing it, like, this is rare, and I'm gonna enjoy it for that reason. Even though it's such a weird way to say I'm gonna enjoy this. I'm gonna enjoy tearing myself apart. But it is like therapy in a lot of ways. And I feel really, that's why I like acting.
Yeah, it was amazing. And Mari, you created a chance for people to, for the first time, I think for many people, really relate and imagine what it's like to transition, you know, all the things you have to think about, the whole process. And it was like we were all talking with a girlfriend and just having a conversation. You shot it in such a way that we felt like we were part of it, and that's really rare. You tell us about some of the things you talked about including and not, you know, I forgot, you know, hair, makeup, clothing, buying clothing, you know, all these things we have to think about.
Well, I think to jump off of what Lynn was saying, I also felt like what I was going to say too was that this movie was definitely a form of art therapy for me. Like all these questions and conflicts that were done, I just sort of poured it out onto the page. So I definitely use parts of my own story or parts of my own life experiences and sort of transplanted them around there. But one of the things that we talked about within this, we wanted to do with the film, was to create a level of universality to the story, and to have it be where it can transcend race or gender or sexuality, and be something that I could understand and relate to. And I think that anyone can relate to lives unlived, everyone relate to like mistakes they've made in the past that they're still harboring pain from, or secret that they've never really told anyone. And so I think that we really like aimed to tell this story with these characters, but not necessarily like, you know, them or alienate them or make them feel like something to stare at and to be enamored with. And I think that like a lot of the narratives that we see now within particularly the outside of the queer community, but people making films and material about the queer community, there's a certain fetishization and there's a certain like level of glorification experiences. But I think by making them really human and intimate, that makes them relatable to anyone. And then anybody can look at it and say, well, I don't know anybody who's transitioned, but now I feel like I hopefully can add a little bit more of their story from a very human perspective. And one of the things that we also a lot about was there's a lot of material right now about trans folks that is on the act of transitioning and on the act of doing this thing, and seeing what those things are. And I think what we hoped and what we wanted to tell was a story that exists past that experience and talks about like what happens after
Mhm.
you know, and I think that was something that we talked a lot about, particularly like in the pre-production, like early talks about it, was like trying to create something that existed outside of this paradigm that was already sort of being set up for us. Yeah.
Absolutely, like creating a whole life. One of my favorite parts of this film was just the discussion about family. You know, what are thoughts, expectations about having a family? When, you know, for Chris wanted kids, always thought about kids, and this isn't something we get to talk about or think about. So Pooya, what did you bring to that character in terms of the perspective of, you know, authentically trans person trying to map out their life and making a decision that really affects the greater family even?
Mari and I talked a lot about this, about how we feel about children in our lives as a queer person. And I wrote a little something about, you know, how this related to me was that I wanted to be a mom. When I was in my early 20s, I was like, you know, I'm going to be in that right relationship by 25 and we're going to adopt. Well, 25 came and I'm like, by 30, that's going to happen. And then came 30 and then so on. And here I am. And at some point I realized that that wasn't going to happen. Also, because I had started my transition 20 something years ago, and I came to the United States because of that was never something that I thought about. Looking back, I never even considered, you know, it's like kind of like freezing the sperm and then seeing what's going to happen later. But one of the things that I have realized, that desire never went anywhere. That desire of wanting to be a mom, or at least, you know, my idea of what it would be like to be a mom. And so one of the great gifts in my life ended up being that I kind of like became a community mom to a whole lot of queer kids that somehow find me on the internet or somewhere, and I become kind of like Mama Pooya. And I say, it's like, you know, it goes back to what this movie means to me is we have our ideas of where we're going to be, and then life happens, and then we end up where we end up, and then what are we going to do with that? So my journey brought me to a point that I wasn't going to have any children on my own. And I was never in a relationship that would allow adoption. And as I very honestly say, either financially or mentally, I'm not stable enough to be able to be a single parent, because just this love that I have for children and, you know, being the child of working parents, and just realize it really takes a whole village to raise that child, to not make that child feel completely neglected. So I'm like, okay, well, that wasn't going to happen. But the world gave me this gift and I get to share my experiences. And I think that's also one of the things that kind of Chris gets to by the end of it. She had this absolute desire. It's like, this would make my life complete. But by the last scene, we worked on the fact that, you know, my life isn't so bad as it is. There are other ways that I can express that need, that desire that I have to be there for someone, to nurture someone, to take care of them. And maybe a little bit of me is in Chris, maybe a little bit of Chris, you know, rubbed off on me. But I have come to realize I am very much a mother. I am very much. No, I didn't give birth. I didn't raise. But if it takes a village, then we're all the village, and I'm part of that village. And I embrace that, and I take that very seriously, sometimes insanely so, you know, talking at 2 o'clock in the morning to someone who's in Iraq and wants to know what to do with their lives. But to do that, it's a sense of gratitude, Pamela. And this movie, being in it, working with these people, working on this particular story with this kind of dialogue with Lynn, directed by Murray, having that whole village to kind of like help nurture that story. I don't know when is going to be the next time that I'm going to feel that loved and that much in contact with everybody. And let it be known, I completely rickrolled everybody on set almost every day.
Every day.
That was the only way I could keep my sanity. And that was my way of like, sharing the love, and it made all of us laugh. So Rick Astley is kind of like an honorary member of the event. But that sense of parenting comes in so many different ways. Some people can do it one way, and some people can do it another way if we're just open to it.
Very well said. And I realized that Kristen, when you sat and wrote all of this dialogue and started to help create this world and these beautiful portrayals, how did the end result compare with your initial vision? Did it come out anywhere close to what you had imagined?
It came out better than I could have imagined. And that's
Wow.
what I love about film. When you bring a group of amazing, talented people together, you're always going to create something better than you could have created on your own. And I think that's really beautiful. I think that the collaboration and the trust and the artistry that you get to work with on projects like these is really exceptional. And it's a privilege to be able to do so. Yeah.
Well, great. You really celebrated, Mari, just women in general. I mean, you shared so many different aspects of what we struggle with universally, how we support each other, how we're vulnerable, how when we have girlfriends and close friends and sisters, we're vulnerable and we know how to hurt each other, but we know how to heal each other and lift each other up. And it was just an amazing film, and so honored to have a little glimpse of what went into making this beautiful film. Both your films really speak to great representation for Asian Pacific American filmmakers, storytellers, stories. Kristen and Mari, you're Japanese American, right?
Yep, we're both third
Yep.
generation.
And from Portland.
Oh, wow, that's
Yeah.
great.
Well, from the area. Yeah.
Yeah, we have very
So we got a lot of love for Eugene and Oregon. Yeah.
So I mean, I'm just really honored to be able to talk with all of you. And Lynn Chen, one more thing. We saw you in Saving Face. It's this great film. If you didn't have a chance to see it, please see it. It was really one of those cutting edge films in its day. And you boldly took a role that was probably pretty controversial at the time. You played a lesbian in a love story, and you were a young woman. You had Joan Chen as a mom. And what do you see as the change from then and now as far as inclusivity?
Yeah, when we made Saving Face, I didn't even know that it was the first feature with Asian lesbians in the leading role until we were at Sundance and someone told us. And we were all like, really? Nobody knew. And I have to say, it hasn't been until recently, and I think that's because of Alice's second feature film, The Half of It, which came out last year, that people remembered Saving Face, and suddenly we realized everyone's seen it. I mean, a lot of people have seen it and studied it in classes, and I feel like whenever I meet an Asian lesbian and she finds out I'm in Saving Face, she like covers her face if she hasn't seen it, because she's like, shame on me. But for me, over the years, I've slowly heard from people who've told me that how much the movie has meant to them and how it helped them come out to their family or how it helped them feel less alone. And I am excited because I know this movie is going to do the same for trans youth, Asian and not Asian, but especially Asian. Like, I just want to cry just thinking about that.
Right.
Because I know I know how important representation is. And even if it takes, 15 years for us to really see the impact of it, I know it's going to happen just because of this movie's existence. So I'm honored to be an ally. It's something that I don't take lightly at all. In fact, I'm so grateful that Mari trusted me to help continue to tell this particular story, because it's very, very important to me.
Yes. Yes, thank you so much. It's been really wonderful to talk with all of you. I would love to hear what your next projects are before we sign off. So maybe I'll start with Dave.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me. Still trying to like get my feet on the ground, but definitely, I think exploring definitely the Asian American lens. I think I've realized is like really something that is really meaningful for me, both to be able to tell those stories, but also for my own journey as like a mixed race person who's the son of an immigrant. I think digging into those. So I'm trying to work on some stuff in New York City's Chinatown. Will hopefully something will come of that. But yeah.
Wonderful. Let's go to Charlene.
Thank you so much again for having us, Pamela. And it was so cool to hear about your process, Mari and Kristen. So yeah, the album came out in November, and as there is no touring, I've just been writing and trying to do the things online that I can to engage. And the quarantine has prompted me to look into some things that I hadn't before when I was touring, and one of that is acting. So I took my first acting class this fall, and I just have so much respect for you, Pooya and Lynn, and what you guys do. And it's really inspiring to see more and more Asian American actors being lifted up and having our stories told. And it's really awesome to see. So who knows? I'm still writing a lot more, but I'm interested in acting as a means of seeing what matters to me and exploring my creativity further. And I'm really enjoying that so far.
We're excited to see more from you then. Mari, let's hear what you've got so much talent and so many ideas. And I loved your film Swim. And
thank you. Yeah, I'm working on a few scripts. I've been maybe there's a young adult love story in the mix, and there's another movie that I've been thinking about, and another very heavy drama that I've been considering as well. So it's all kind of up in the air right now. Hopefully something will settle in by the end of the year, and the next project will be off and running.
That's right. Well, see you then. Premiered at South by Southwest. That's not a bad way to kick off 2021, right? Congratulations.
Oh, definitely. Dream come true. Thank you. Thank you so much.
And Kristen.
Yeah, I'm working with a few directors, just developing scripts and projects, and excited to get those off the ground. Everything's a little bit on hold right now with COVID, trying to do things safely. So yeah, just fostering those creative projects and getting them ready to go.
Great. We're excited to see what comes from you next. And Pooya, tell us what you're doing.
One of the perils of being a trans actor is everybody thinks of you when there's a trans character. So that there's a little bit of back and forth with that. But I'm fortunate enough that the team that I'm with, my agent, my manager, they really believe in me. So auditions have been happening. Some distanced projects have been happening. But in all honesty, the most important thing in my life right now, as we're talking about representation, the queer community in Iran really needs help, really needs visibility. So whenever I get an opportunity to sit on a panel, to do an interview, to do a clip that I can speak in my mother tongue and show my community members, show people from my motherland, know that I'm here, know that there's a way forward. That is, in all honesty, that is the most important thing in my life. Acting, I love. I love acting, but a purpose in life, to be there for my queer kids, of
Mhm.
any language, but especially the ones that really need it because of the lack of resources.
Mhm.
That has become my mission in life, and I hope that I can be a credit to the land that I was born in, the people who raised me, and hopefully be able to make cultural improvements so everybody can feel seen and seated at the table.
Well, you're a great activist, and your life is meaningful, and you're touching a lot of people with the work that you do. So thank you. And Lynn, what are you up to? You mentioned you were directing?
Yes, I mean, my movie, I Will Make You Mine, came out last May.
Mhm.
It also premiered at South by Southwest.
Oh,
So
great.
it's doubly meaningful to have a third movie in a row at that
Yeah.
festival. The other one was Go Back to China. And yeah, I just feel like that train never ends. We're about to have our international premiere in Osaka. Sorry about this light right now. Just
That's okay.
glowing. I've been doing a lot of writing. I wrote a TV pilot and another feature. I'm working on a few shorts that I will be directing next year. And then aside from See You Then, I have a few features that are also doing the festival circuit right now: Pooling to Paradise, Paper Tiger, and A Shot Through the Wall. All
Wonderful.
filmed before the pandemic, so we'll see what ends up happening. So
Different kind
yeah,
of film.
we'll see what we'll see what ends up happening.
You are so busy and such a champion for women and for Asian American stories and indie film. So thank you. And I feel like both of your films really help us all heal and look inward and try to find the best in ourselves, listen to our own voices. So thank you all for your incredible work. It's been really lovely sitting to chat with you, and we look forward to seeing more from you in the future.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
And
so
thank you
much.
everyone for
Thank you.
watching too.
Thank you everyone.
Sure.